It's your girls, Jilly B and K Dubs, reporting from Fort Lauderdale. It is Pod 56.
The question is, can Pro Pickleball be fixed?
You know, I think that the UPA can be successful, but not with leadership whose natural reaction to any type of challenge is
Name calling.
Censor, to bully, to obfuscate, to fabricate, to exaggerate, to deflect. You know, I don't think they're financially bankrupt yet, but I do think they are certainly, in my personal opinion, morally bankrupt.
Agree. Well said.
You tune in now to this pickleball life. I'm K-Dubs and Jilly B is my wife. She's the pro and I've got the filler. She's sweet to me, but on the court she's a killer. Unadulterated and efficiently bringing you the best and worst things in PB. Tell your friends and stay for another. And no one loves us more than your mother. One thing's for sure, when hit and you're addicted. Grab a pile, grab a court, don't resist it. So click subscribe, let's go, let's get cracking. Things on gun, let's go, let's get laughing. This pickleball life.
So it's been a slow couple weeks.
Yeah, nothing's happened in 2025. Such a boring year so far.
Super boring start. Kristen and I are reporting from the beautiful home of Brad Tuckman, the owner and builder of the Fort, the 44-court facility here in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale. We actually, believe it or not, got in last night and haven't even been there yet because we're staying at his house and just trained a little bit on his private court. Thank you, Brad.
Convenience factor, 12 out of 10.
We have to have Brad on the show as a guest. His story is fascinating. What he went through to actually build this amazing complex is a true feat, and I think we could all learn something from it.
Do you remember the first time you met Hesacore?
I do. Jaume Martinez Vic was playing it, and
MLP Dallas, right?
And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, you have to try this." And I grabbed his paddle, and I was like, Whoa. And I think it's definitely like a love or hate thing, although I've only met one person who didn't like it.
I've never met a person.
Anyway, it was like love at first sight. And, you know, your grip doesn't slip as much, like especially if you're a sweater. Like if you're listening to this in Florida and you don't play Hesacore, what are you doing?
I always feel like, where do my fingers go when I don't have a Hesacore? You know, there's that little nook and cranny that gives me that security to feel like I can really swing this wand.
I also feel like it absorbs so much of the shock from the paddle. Like as paddles get hotter and hotter and hotter, especially if you're playing like a little bit firmer of the paddle.
Yeah,
like
vibration dampening.
You just do not want that shooting up your arm.
Totally. So don't miss out. Get on the Hesacore bandwagon immediately. You will not regret it.
You can go to shop.hesacore.com and use code JillyB for 10% off.
Yeah. So yeah, it will be an interesting year, both on the rules side of things, and as we've seen the evolution of paddle testing, and we talk about paddles all the time, are we headed for that plateau where, like, what's the next frontier of innovation? Durability, feel, spin, perimeter weighting, MOI, COG. When are they going to take a page out of the golf book?
No, I think that's a really, really compelling question, right? We're seeing now the UPA solidify their standards for how hot they want to have a paddle, how gritty they want to see a paddle, or how much dwell time the paddle has. You're seeing USAP, exact same thing, solidifying theirs. It's nice that we're going to have two totally different standards. Yay! Bifurcation and fragmentation for the sport.
But maybe three if we go international.
Yeah, maybe three, you guys.
Maybe 200.
But it's like, okay, so what's next then? Will someone build? Who's going to build the first indestructible $500 paddle? Like lifetime warranty, indestructible, no core crush. And does that just like ruin the industry? It's like the one guy that comes in and does that. The other manufacturers are like, knife him. He's out. She's out. Kill her.
Well, it's literally, you look at the history of appliances, not to get too segued, but it's like they just don't make things like they used to.
Yeah.
They want that, what's the word? Planned obsolescence.
Yes, built-in obsolescence, like the iPhone batteries.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want that paddle
to
last
it's funny.
for 10 years.
I spent just as much on my tennis rackets growing up, and man, those things, I still have my tennis rackets.
But big asterisk. The maintenance of a tennis racket.
Yeah, the stringing. Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, the frame's not sitting there core crushing.
Yeah. If only you could just replace the core.
No, that's a good point. You're constantly investing into the stringing element of it.
Yeah. But anyway, we're going to get back into some other fun paddle news later, but I think we want to hit the bull by its horn right off the bat. Do you want to segue into the Tweetstorm from this week?
Absolutely. So I wrote a blog that was intended to stay as a blog. And then Kristen's always on me like, you should tweet more. Like, that's really your medium. You love writing.
Written word.
Like, yeah, like tweet. So
Thought, go.
I go through this like incredibly laborious process to take this huge
She actually
blog.
did it herself.
Look, Ma, I did it all by myself.
Plus.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there hitting the like plus.
Oh,
Anyway,
Jill, did you release the entire blog on Twitter? Yes. Yes, she did.
So I go through the totally laborious process of taking the tweet, taking the blog, putting it as a tweet. Elon, we got to talk. There's got to be a better way to do this. How much money do you want from me on a weekly or monthly basis so that I never have to do this again?
There is an upgrade plan for long tweets. So they do want your money. But point being, I went to my other job and I was teaching golf that day, and every now and then I'd look down at my phone and be like, oh, Twitter notification. Oh, Samin Adwani tweeted at you. Oh, Rob Nunnery. I'm like, what is going on Twitter today?
All right, so the title of the blog was, Is Pro Pickleball a House of Cards? PPA and MLP need emergency loan to get through Q1 2025. The first paragraph reads, 10 months after the blockbuster $75 million merger between MLP, LeBron James, Tom Brady, Anheuser-Busch, and Tom Dundon's Carvana Topgolf-backed PPA Tour, the new entity, the UPA, needs an emergency bridge loan of $10 million by January 15th to meet its financial obligations. At the same time, the bridge loan request was sent to the MLP team owners, and not without irony, the UPA announced via press release, Pro Pickleball continues to explode. PPA Tour and Major League Pickleball have their best year ever in 2024, citing that female pickleball players make more than WNBA players and pickleball on Fox outperformed an MLS Cup broadcast. I posed the question in the blog, so will the UPA survive 2025, or will it be pickleball's Fire Fest, a gorgeous, celebrity-laden, deliciously decadent, soon-to-be relic unless a change of leadership and or continued funding and bailout occurs?
I mean, that's just a fun sentence right there. There's 700,000 views for sure right there.
And if UPA does survive, will they find themselves fighting yet again over players with new competing tours in 1.5 years once UPA's exclusive player contracts come up? So, Kristen, when we write something like this, you don't put it out there and think it's going to have 1 million views in 36 hours, be on the front page of Twitter. People with millions of followers are going to be reposting it.
And look, we are fully aware that of the 720 whatever thousand people who viewed the tweet, that probably 500,000 of them were tennis players who couldn't wait to bandwagon on the negative pickleball press that they were perceiving here. So it's not like we're unaware of the reality of the internet. Doesn't make sense. So it is what it is. We just are trying to share the truth and share things that we think are important and interesting.
Yep, well said. Go ahead.
It does beg the question, why do we do it? Why do we care? Why do we say these things?
Yeah.
Why do we share these facts?
Well, the male executives of the UPA decided to tweet back. They called me a grudge-holding, bitter liar who's not very good at pickleball.
Yes. Not in that particular order, but those particular words.
Yep. So I thought it was a disproportionate, is the word that comes to mind, reaction to a blog that touched on a lot more than the UPA, touched on the YOLO lawsuit, the APP tour, the up-and-coming PWR tour. It was basically like a 2024 recap.
Yeah.
And I thought their reaction was, well, they say we're going to be $1 billion company. Well, if they were $1 billion company, their resignation letters would have been tendered. They always try and compare themselves to the WNBA. Well, if the chairman of the WNBA, the commissioner, the chief strategy officer ever spoke like that to one of their female players, I think that those resignations would be tendered. And I thought it was interesting, too, to mock my skill because I'm the second ranked female in Challenger.
Also,
And
it'd be one thing if he
that
was the
puts-
owner of the team that won
Against
MLP
us.
or something, but it's like the one time we met them, we beat Brooklyn. So
I won
you're
all my
literally inadvertently making fun of your own players on your own team by saying that Jill isn't very good.
Well, that's what's so weird. Like, I won all my matches against his team. I'm the second ranked woman in Challenger, which makes me the 26th ranked female in the world. Like, sorry, I'm not 12. Like,
Yeah.
and
no one's saying that either.
Well-
It's like we're just out here trying to spread the joy of pickleball and share interesting things with
Yeah.
our audience.
well, so I'll go back to why do we do this? I'll go
Yeah.
back to that. But I thought that the response also just was so insulting to the other females, right? So are you saying on one hand that everyone who's at my skill level or worse just totally sucks, but you're also saying you pay them $260,000 a year to suck? So what's that like also saying about your business model?
Right.
Like, that makes no sense.
Not to mention that you intentionally left their tour.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like they didn't make you an offer. It was like you said, no, thank you, which is a
Well,
very
let's talk
different
about that. Yeah.
situation than lots of other players out there who would die for these contracts but don't have the option.
Well, let's talk about that. You know, I actually felt bad for Connor and Sameen. When I saw that that was their reaction, I thought, oh my goodness, this is the reaction of two people at an entity that is so accustomed to controlling narratives, and they cannot control this narrative.
Right.
This is what it looks like when they cannot control a narrative. They're used to having their fingers in the kitchen, which is a pickleball digital online community. They're used to owning pickleball.com, which is another news digital community. And they're used to owning their players and the conversation that happens among their players. Right. So for something like this to gain traction was like an abomination to them. So I actually kind of felt bad.
In what way did you feel bad? That like you felt bad that they couldn't do what they were trying to do? You felt bad that they were having a bad day? You felt bad that they were worried you had power over them?
I empathized with their feeling like their business is being attacked. And I've asked multiple stakeholders at MLP, hey, what did I write that was wrong? And do you know what the response has been?
Let me guess. They didn't like your use of the word Firefest.
That's funny. They didn't like my use of a different word, which was the word emergency.
So what they're trying to say is that needing $10 million in a month isn't an emergency.
Yes, that's what they're trying to say.
Seems pretty subjective to me.
And it was interesting because if you just read the comments on like the platforms that they control, right? I think it's hard to assess like, oh, is, Jill getting bashed here or people standing up for her or what? Because like my sister was saying she'd see something really positive about me and then it would be deleted. And I'm like, oh, that seems even bad for them to do, but you never know. But I see the response, right? I'm getting text messages from people. So one team owner.
There's definitely a lot of response that is more slanted towards your side that wasn't deleted too. So there's plenty of positive reaction on, I don't even know if you call it positive, but there's plenty of people who kind of see what might be the case.
Well, I got a text from multiple MLP stakeholders, one of whom is a team owner. And they said, Connor's lying if his lips are moving. They go on to say, any figures we get from Connor, viewership, spectators, registration number, you name it, is most likely total garbage. So, one thing I would say to the executives is, look, if everything's so like rosy in your business, right? Because that was their response, other than to call me a liar.
Yeah, they're basically saying
was to say everything's amazing. Like,
we planned on this.
Like
we planned on needing $10 million. We weren't surprised by this emergency.
Oh, and by the way, we're going to do $9 million in ticket sales. We're going to do $35 million in sponsor revenue. So their response is to throw out these unsubstantiable revenue targets or these numbers and to say everything's okay. Everything's okay. If everything's okay, get control over your stakeholders and message and communicate that effectively to them so they're not messaging me. So we go back to, why do we do this? Well, we're conduits to the information that we receive. And it is not our goal to muckrake. It has never been. What did someone say to me the other day? They said, well, you're always going to pull back Oz's curtain. But it doesn't matter which Oz, right? Like, if there's something that is business related and interesting to talk about, we're going to pose questions. And that's what we did in that tweet, in that blog.
Right.
It was questions.
I think someone said, like, oh, biting the hand that feeds her, or like, why is this player, attacking the entity, paying the pros? And the reality is there aren't very many people, let alone pros, that are in Jill's position of being able to speak freely. So if Jill doesn't say it, who's going to?
Well, there's this amazing Upton Sinclair quote. Have you heard this?
No, tell me.
I had to write it down because I so don't want to butcher it. It was in the Tools of Titans book I'm reading. And it goes like this. It's very hard to get someone to understand something that their salary depends on them not understanding.
That is good.
But speaking of the hand that feeds and me not being, good enough to have a PPA contract, I had one. I was a gold card holder. I gave that up. I didn't want it.
Right. Right.
I think that gets lost. Another team owner called you after listening to the pod. And what did they say?
They said, you're totally right. They're treating us like piggy banks. Look, obviously we believe in the sport and we believe in the pros. And I think coming from a person who has been around sports my whole life, is a professional athlete and a professional coach, there are a lot of sports that I don't want to watch. And I like watching pickleball. So it's a 100% internal statistic, but I feel like if someone like me who genuinely doesn't watch a lot of sports enjoys watching pickleball, that at least speaks to some segment of the population. And I get it. I get that pickleball on TV has not figured itself out yet, but I do believe that between the storylines, the camera angles, and the betting, that pickleball is here to stay, and viewership of pickleball is coming, and it's so much more fun to watch than arguably. And this is, come at me. I'm fine with it. Come at me in the comments, but baseball, come on. Baseball is 99% boring, 1%, oh wow, something just happened. Even golf, right? Like if you go to a golf tournament, you are either standing in one place watching 72 people hit one shot in front of you, or you're walking 5 miles behind a crowd of people just to hope to see one 7-iron land on a green, and then like walk another hundreds of yards just to see the next one 5 minutes later.
You bring up a really good point. So you said, well, what do you feel bad about? What do you empathize with Connor and Samin and the whole UPA? And I would say I empathize with how monumental of a task they have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is to create demand, which is to essentially take this sport that is such a recreational sport, so played, and turn that interest into viewership interest, into interest in the pros. Take the 20 million players and say, hey, come watch the big leagues. Get interested in this. And either they've got to create that, or they have to survive long enough to hedge and gamble that interest will naturally get there. And that is a monumental task. And for someone to come in and go, well, I'm questioning this business model, and how long is this really going to last? And is the interest there? And let's really dive into the numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's threatening.
Yeah.
Now, if your business is doing well, or if you're so confident that you're going to have the funding to wait this out, and you have actually substantiable facts and figures, not just like, blown out revenue targets. If you really believe in your business, I don't think that's the way you respond.
By the way, Jill said I'm going to be 5-0 by the end of this year. So you heard it here first. Those are just facts.
Talk about unsubstantiable facts. Sorry. And no,
but if you say it loud enough, long enough, it must be true.
Well, so what I thought was not picked up in the news and all of this was the same week I'm kind of asking questions about is professional pickleball as a whole kind of one giant fire fest. You have Selkirk and Tom Barnes, the chief technical officer of Selkirk. For those of you that don't know Selkirk, they are probably the largest endemic sponsor of the PPA Tour. I believe there's even some a mutual equity exchange there in some capacity. And Tom went on multiple podcasts to talk about the trials and tribulations he is having with the UPA. In fact, he likened a letter Connor had written to Enron.
Should we insert some of those clips here?
Yeah. Why listen to us? You can listen to Tom and what he has to say about his experience. And keep in mind, this is the largest endemic sponsor of the PPA, and this is probably one of their longest standing sponsors, period.
And this is from Chris Olson on the Pickleball Studio. I'll add the link to the description as well if you want to see the full pod.
It was the first video call. I want to try to link this back to Connor and his letter saying UPAA, who works closely with both the Paddle Manufacturing Advisory Committee and the Pro Paddle Committee. Guess what? In this third meeting, and then, by the way, they've listened to nothing anyone said. All the manufacturer suggestions, all the pushback, no change. Like it's just a meeting where they tell us it's a presentation. It's a presentation to us, and they walk away and just like turn their brains off in the meeting. Like it's a presentation to us. They clearly don't listen to anything we have to say. Like, and just talking about the logistical constraints and the logistical problems, they don't care. We had the last meeting, and then they had us all on mute, which is kind of weird. Oh, okay, but they're just trying to present. Great. So we get through the meeting. It's almost purely technical. And I'm like, okay, when we get to the Q&A section, we'll be able to talk. However, we got to the Q&A section, and guess what? They didn't unmute us. They literally didn't unmute us. And what I mentioned is like, hey, I have this data on percent. And I explained that. Hey, like myself and all the manufacturers here got together, and we did some polling. We have some issues we'd like to communicate to you. And then they like, oh no, hey, and then Jason's like, oh no, hey, we'll deal with this offline. And I'm like, no, I don't want to deal with this offline. This is the committee that did polling and had a meeting, and we want to talk to you.
It's not like it's new info.
Again, what's it called? It's called a advisory committee. What advisory committees are not allowed to advise? They're saying we're again, the UPA, who works closely with the Paddle Manufacturing Advisory Committee, yet we're not even allowed to talk. That's censorship. They've tried to foment the pros against us by giving them misleading statements. Like, oh, hey, they're not sending in, like, you got to get them to send pals. Like, no, we're working on it. Like, but like, you cannot leverage people like the pros against us. And because we have a very good, guess what? We have a very good relationship with a lot of these pros. So they call us on the phone. It's like, hey, he's saying this, but you told me this. Like, what's going on? And it's like going back to like, say what you mean and do what you say. This is so prevalent. It's so systemic. It's so frustrating. So like they'll pull whatever lever they want, to milk whatever money out of whoever, regardless how forced it is or not. And it's a death by 1,000 cuts, right? At this point, it's just we're way past the point of no return.
So if you're UPA, you're like, okay, maybe I don't care that you're not happy, but you still did it.
And then that ends here soon. Like that no longer, that whole thing of them coercing us, it stops here. Like it has to. Like one way or another, it's got to stop. Like we can no longer abide by them just like harming everyone and doing all these things and giving nothing in return. And who's to say this isn't 10 times worse next year and then 10 times worse the following year? They leverage our name in places we don't want it. So for instance, like we never asked for the marketing license, that $50K that they're pulling out of nowhere that gives us nothing in return. We don't want it. We don't like it. We never asked for it. Yet in their letter, they're like, contract out or verbal commitment to the marketing license. And then they list us in there. So they're saying contract out. They sent us a contract that we didn't want or ask for. And then they're like, oh, Selkirk. And then they put our name on the contract out as if we're like supporting it or did it. Man, imagine if I was like doing an investor deal. Send a DocuSign out to Nike and Adidas and a bunch of other top sporting goods brands. Oh, by the way, we have contracts out with Nike and Adidas and Reebok and whoever else. Like we were contract out. Like who says that? A, that's very misleading. That contract out means we're actually in some sort of undergoing some sort of work with them. And B, it's like, who says that? Who says contract out or verbal commitment? So I don't want this contract. And so why would I pay for paddle fees? So we're just not, at this point, why would we pay for both? Because if we pay for one or the other, we still can't get paddles in the pro circuit. We have to do both. And they're conflating them one and the same. Like you got to do this and this. And it's one package. We're like, no, this is a certification or regulatory requirement over here. And this is just some random lever to pull over here to make more money. And they're conflating as it's one product. Multiple of the brands on here are willing but are not able due to to co-sign this letter and to go against them. We have like lots of people that are willing but are not able at this time to like basically like do like embargo and that kind of thing. then like I got like all these people, like it made me feel like I wasn't like just some one guy screaming in the desert, right? Because a lot of this stuff, I feel like I'm just some guy screaming in the desert because like does anyone see this? Am I the only one in the room? Like what is going on? Like what is going on? Like am I nuts?
Yeah.
Like how I felt. But then after like all these people were trying to say, oh, I'm not crazy. Good. Like so I can stop taking my pills. I'm not crazy. This really interesting dynamic started happening where manufacturers are actually talking to manufacturers and, hey, like, should we like organize? Like as a manufacturer, should we organize? And the poll was 100%. Should we come together as some sort of notional committee? Pickleball Equipment Manufacturers Association. So it's a trade association.
Is this already real, or is this like still in the process of being made?
It's notionally real, but we need to form it as a legal entity, and we plan to do that in the first week or two of January. No one in this industry has provided any transparency. Like at this point, I think the only people that can bring true transparency to the manufacturers and then do that in a holistic and collaborative approach. Regulatory capture is such a huge problem. If you don't know, like racquetball, case study is the racquetball with huge explosive growth. The whole thing came crashing to the ground fundamentally because of regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is when those who are meant to be regulated become the ones making the rules. So you have the regulation that is making the rules and supposed to be enforcing it, but then the ones that regulate pay these guys money to either make up the rules, change the rules, or to skip enforcement.
Well, which is what I feel like everyone's afraid of with UPA.
Yeah, communication issue. This is there is a communication issue, but it's due to them not talking to it, like purposely not communicating. Like they will not be transparent yet. They're feigning transparency while being the least transparent org in this entire industry. Yes, at this point, it's made clear that they don't give a crap about our opinion. And then they say we're working closely with them and they're advising us, and they leave us on mute. Like that is the last straw. Like honestly, that was the last straw. We're way past the point of no return on this. Like this is not something. I don't know if there's any concessions that could be made that will make it right in the long term. Put our entire industry in peril. We can run this. The manufacturers can run this industry to the ground. These guys can run the industry into the ground. Media can run this industry into the ground. So there's a lot of mistakes that could be made that could lead us down a very bad path.
Yeah.
People are so like, this is not a fad. All in. It's like, no, we can absolutely destroy this, bring this whole thing come crashing to the ground with everyone just totally mismanaging the entire industry. We've only had a small taste of that. So why we've only had a small taste of that, let's address it and fix it so that we don't get a really big heaping pile of crap of this, and then that's what causes our industry to fail 5 years from now.
So that was Tom Barnes. I mean, wow. We saw them write the Selkirk letters this year.
Yeah.
Now he's speaking out against the UPA and his experiences and sharing his behind the scenes curtain.
If you noticed, but I also sent you a clip this morning from one of the Selkirk sponsored podcasts talking about the Grayson Golden not being able to bypass qualification as well. So it seems like Selkirk is sort of doubling down on its effort to criticize the PPA and the UPA on their own right.
Thank you for bringing that up because, again, the same week that I do this tweet, you've got Selkirk obviously out there, and you've got Grayson Golden, the number 22 ranked player on the PPA in singles, top 5 ranked on the APP in singles, and he's got to go through qualifying at the Masters. Vivian Glosman, who finished top 4 at the Masters, had to go through qualifying with her partner Jackie Kawamoto. Is it a tour or is it an exhibition tour? Like this is what Tom Webb always talks about from the APP, which is the UPA is not a real tour. That's an exhibition tour. That's a bunch of salaried players getting handed main draw positions and slots and positions they do not deserve. His words.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, no. And it's a catch-22 because it's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. If you've paid $30 million to 107 players or whatever it is, you got to feel like, oh, I've invested in these people. I should give them as much of a leg up as I can so that they become the stars instead of these people I haven't paid. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if you really think about it mathematically, if they're spending $30 million on players, and a lot of that arguably is because MLP requires more players. The PPA doesn't really require that many players. They could just pay 20 people and let whoever else show up to get beat up by the same 20 people every week. There's an argument that like, oh, wow, they're doing such a good deed. They're paying these players so that, the tail isn't so sharp on the people who make money versus not. But there are other ways of compensating players that allow for much more freedom and structuring prize money differently or bonuses differently. But my point is this: if they were looking for $10 million in this non-emergency bridge loan, could they have not just restructured $10 million out of expenditures to pros? Like, is this the fact that they're stuck in 3-year contracts? Is this like part of the plan? But it seemed like they were going to let a bunch of players go. And then when PWR reared its head, they doubled down on locking in these players. So those are just conjectures, obviously.
That's just conjecture. I can't speak to that.
An interesting sort of question to ponder.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting question, which is if they're financially hurting, wouldn't we start to see what we just talked about paddle companies doing, right? The lowest hanging fruit is kind of canceling these contracts. At the same time, you've got the sunk cost syndrome taking place, which is cancel these contracts and go release them all to PWR and APP and strengthen our competitors. But at the same time, they're going to have to do that in the next year and a half, because in a year and a half when the exclusive agreements come up, they're going to be fighting over players again. It's going to all start over. So I guess really the core question, forget the emergency bridge loan, like forget that. The core question is, with $30 million a year in player salaries, is any league viable in professional pickleball? Forget that it's the UPA.
Well, and I think the thing that I come back to is like, why sign players? Okay, you want to sign players to make sure you have a product, because without players, there's nothing to watch. Okay, well, do you not want to spend the least amount of money on the best possible players? So you've got these like Grace and Goldens out there. And, we saw last year with the entrance of you and Megan in the shuffle that, there are better players who are unsigned than some of the signed players. No one's going to argue that. Do you not want to create a situation that allows for that breathing influx and outflux and flow, so that you create the best venue to allow for the best players to show up?
And I think the next blog post really, and a really interesting question, is which professional tour has the most viable business model, right? Because what has Tom Dundon always wanted to do, right? Create a tour with the best players, create stars. Those were his words. I'm going to create household names. But if you ask other entities in professional pickleball, they'll tell you, dude, nobody knows who you guys are. Like, no offense. Like the broadcast numbers for all of us are equivalent, whether it's APP, PPA, it's equivalent. And doubling down your entire business strategy and your business model on, we're creating household names, we're going to have the best players, is something that I don't think people like at home know.
Right. No. What we get is a lot of like, hey, I was in an airport lounge and I saw you on ESPN2, Jill. Mm-hmm. They don't know what they're watching. Are we just like, oh, it's pickleball.
Are we too early for that?
Right.
The need to own Ben Johns, the need to own.
I would liken it to the Olympics, right? Which of course comes around every 4 years or 2 years, depending on how you look at it. But most of the Olympic athletes are unknown. So what do the Olympics spend 80% of their coverage on? And this is part of the criticism, by the way, of the Olympics, is they have like mini documentaries about these Americans going to compete for their country mostly, and sometimes non-Americans, but they have these mini documentaries so that now when they cut to the long jump and you're like, oh, I don't even like know what this sport is or how it's judged, but I just watched that flying spider dude and now I care. So they spend 80% of their effort trying to teach the viewer who they're watching.
Yeah.
And 20% of the time watching the actual sport.
Well, and so I think that if the PPA is going to continue, or UPA, down this path of we're creating stars, they've got to start doing that. Create those narratives.
Yeah.
Like
right now, it's
paying
more like
for it.
95.5 in the other direction. Like you'll see their little like blurbs and they have someone sitting on a couch and they're asking them cute questions, but they've really got to invest, I think, much more heavily in the storylines and the documentaries. And,
if that's the route they want to go.
Just like those extra, 80 players. I do believe that even if they didn't have enough signed athletes to fill the rosters of MLP, that they would still be fine. They would just sign new players as they picked them.
So look, I don't know if we need to beat a dead horse here. Ultimately, I think there's nothing the executives could have said or done to hurt me worse than they have hurt themselves.
Yeah.
And, I think that the UPA can be successful, but not with leadership whose natural reaction to any type of challenge is
name calling,
censor, to bully, to obfuscate, to fabricate, to exaggerate, to deflect. I don't think they're financially bankrupt yet, but I do think they are certainly, in my personal opinion, morally bankrupt.
Agree. Well said. So I just had jotted down a few questions I saw from the comments that you can decide which or any to cover. But does this put the pro game in danger? Like, are our actions hurting the salaries of those 90 to 110th players, or even the 30th ranked players?
I think the question was more about the pro game
in general,
and something that Tom Barnes talks a lot about.
They're related, right?
Well, I think something that Tom Barnes talks about that's really interesting is like, this is now hurting businesses, not small ones, actually, like big businesses. The decisions the UPA are making is affecting us all in a very negative way. And he's talking about product manufacturers, right? Not just paddles.
And you hear in the end of the clip that we played, he starts talking about PEMA, the organization they're starting to unite the paddle manufacturers.
Which leads to the next question, what happened to the player collective? So what's interesting is we're seeing Tom Barnes kind of leading the charge with Selkirk to create PEMA, which is a player collective, but of paddle manufacturers. And I do think a player collective absolutely that's the number one thing people kept writing into us after the last podcast was players need a collective.
Yeah. What happened to the player collective?
They're going to start getting asked right now to renew these exclusive agreements, right?
Yeah.
Because they're in a year and a half, which means they might start negotiating those literally like effective immediately. And I think what is required for a player collective to happen is it's got to be top players, males and females, coming together to say, hey, we're doing this. And then that bleeds down.
Right.
It's got to be top down.
What we saw in tennis with
and it
Djokovic.
Goes back to the Upton Sinclair quote, right? And yes, it goes back to what Djokovic did. Top player, said, okay, two middle fingers in the air and said, I'm going to create what's right.
Yeah.
And created a council.
Yeah, no, agree. So I think in a good way, I do think that the player collective did serve a purpose. And I think a large part of that purpose was just fact organizing for players who were very confused at the time with what they were dealing with and looking at contracts. And not everyone was raised by a lawyer like you were and has the brain that you have, or the know-how to call the right people and ask the right questions. So the player collective did a good job of giving access to lawyers and to information.
Yes, yeah.
And even though there is no current collective that we know of, although there is like a player advisory board, and I'm not sure anyone's ever...
There was also a paddle advisory board.
But point being that the player collective did serve a purpose in that tumultuous time. And I think it will eventually come back. It can't be Jill. It's not Jill.
Well, it just can't be one person, period. Yeah, it's got to be
not
a group of players like it was the first time, but it's got to be more high-level players who are willing to prove the Upton Sinclair quote wrong.
Yeah. The irony is the more Grayson Goldens and like Chris Hayworths you see that are like actually
tweeting the truth,
very real top players who aren't signed by the PPA, makes it a little more likely you'll start seeing some kind of player collective, I think, versus people who are sort of like, oh, I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me. Like you need a certain person who's willing to risk some of what they have or feels confident in that they aren't risking losing what they've had, like Djokovic.
I think another, back to kind of why we do this, another reason is like playing pro pickleball was like a freak bonus at 33 years old to have a professional career and make that change.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, none of this feels real. We've never created our whole identity, our whole income, and our whole life around being a professional player. I've always known there's probably a limit on how many more years I can be hyper competitive. Although you look at Tina Pisnik and you look at other players and you see them getting better and better and they're older than me. But still, there's this element of I'm almost on the outside of this looking in, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a top 5 player whose livelihood is literally depending on points won or lost and their relationship with their tour. So it's easier for us to be these kind of outsiders looking in and former executives and say like, that's not right. That doesn't smell right.
Yeah. And from the get-go, you turned down more money from the PPA than MLP was offering. So
I don't know if I've ever said that on the podcast.
I think you have.
Had an offer from PPA. It was 25% more than what MLP was offering me. And you know what's interesting about that time? I was thinking about this 2 days ago during those tour wars. So many diehard PPA players, what did they do? They flipped. Tyson, Riley, left. They signed with MLP.
Yeah.
They didn't want to stay at PPA. What does that say?
Right.
They didn't even
Speaks for itself.
And they didn't even ask for a counter.
Yeah.
From PPA. They didn't even go to them and go, "Hey, will you match us?" They just wanted out.
Is Adderall usage as big of an issue as with the pros as rumored? If so, should there be testing? I would start with this one, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree.
I have strong opinions.
I know you do.
Go ahead.
The drug testing right now is not the biggest fish to fry, and Adderall specifically is pointless because if you have a prescription, then you'd be fine, and most of the people who are using Adderall are able to get a prescription. From what I understand, I've never had one, used it, or tried, but it's pretty widely known that, you go to a doctor and say the right things, they'll pretty much prescribe anyone Adderall. Is that going too far? Perhaps I'm generalizing too much, but it's not the hardest thing in the world to get a prescription for, so
I agree
bother?
with all of that. All you need is a prescription. As far as it being a performance enhancer, it absolutely is. So, it's a very widely known rumor that players in South Florida pass it around like candy. And there's players who don't have prescriptions that are on it and take it as a performance enhancement drug. It absolutely is. I have never tried it. If I had, I'd be open and say I have, but I haven't. I have no desire. It is something that kind of once you get on, you'll probably be on for the rest of your life. That was what a physician told me who's been on it since medical school. And I think that over time you will see those players' performances drop because I do think long-term use of it is super, super dehydrating. I mean, think about when you take like a Sudafed, right? And this actually happened to me. I was at Kansas for MLP and I was sick. And I took a Sudafed because I'm like sick. It's super dehydrating. I don't know if long-term effects are conducive to a sport where you're sweating a lot and super physical. Not that pickleball is like as physical as tennis. But I probably think on those like really long grindy days, it catches up with the player, especially if they're upping their dose during competing and they're doing that for 3-4 days in a row. I think you can see some crashes from that.
Yeah. Speaking of which, though,
I also think
ketone IQ saved you.
I also think once you start upping your dose, like there's no going backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. As is with most drugs, unfortunately. So yeah, Adderall, it's definitely out there. All right. So some other comments we loved. I'll start with Zaf if you want. This is from Zaf7819. When the PPA MLP contracts expire in about 18 months, which basically everyone was on either 1 or 3 year contracts, and then some of those 1 year contracts have now extended for 3 more years. So I don't know about the 18 months, but in the next 2 years to 3 years, they're going to start expiring. UPA is unlikely to maintain current salary levels unless Tom Dundon or other wealthy owners are willing to absorb the costs to monopolize the best players, which is basically what we've been seeing right now. Regardless of the salaries offered by PPA MLP, players will not sign exclusive contracts if they can earn more by competing on other tours like APP, UTR, and PWR when combining appearance fees and prize money. It is only because of the high salaries and exclusive contracts that professional pickleball players tolerate the indignities and incompetence of UPA's management. playing without appropriate paddle standards, using balls produced by a startup granted manufacturing rights, lacking Hawkeye electronic line calls, dealing with inept serve rules, often competing on courts with poor surfaces, inadequate lighting, insufficient spacing, and other shortcomings. UPA is the first soap opera I've ever found entertaining. Can't wait for the next episode. We keep the trailers coming, Jilly B.
Zaf7819, will you marry me? Kristen, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm marrying Zaf7819. I don't know if they're a guy or a girl.
Do you think Zaf7819 is actually a PPA player?
Zach the redhead. Zaf, no.
So
no, that all makes total sense. That's just spot on.
Yeah. So Jill, say 3 positive things about the PPA. Go.
Amazing marketers.
Oh, they are leaning into juniors.
Sure.
They are getting smart people who have other job opportunities the freedom and job security to quit their jobs and play pro pickleball full time. I do think that is, something worth celebrating, perhaps. Whether or not that's a good idea, a good strategy for their business is up for debate.
I think, just maybe we're beating a dead horse here, but when people say like, oh, she's a grudge holder, it's like,
I mean, I don't even know what grudge they think you're holding other than like, please write down your rules, as Leia Jansen said.
So look, to put a pin in everything, suffice it to say, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou said that. And as far as being a bitter grudge holder, I don't know what grudge I'm holding, but yes, I am a victim of my own eyes and my own experiences and what I have personally seen and had happen to me. So that is true, but no grudge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had one sponsor write into us and said, the model is broken. No, the model is flawed because it hinges on pro players and the interest level in that is years and years away. They're so focused on ownership and monopoly that they've bought the wrong assets. Interesting.
Right. That's what my point is like, wouldn't the players just show up if they just created a good product? Like, obviously we see all these people in qualies. Like, they want to be there. They want to play. They want to compete. You see all the amateurs at 4.0 and 4.5 and 5.0. People love competing. Like, it is built into our mother effing like DNA from our evolutionary biology to go us them ourselves on a court and like swat at things and throw things and hit things.
Yeah.
Like, we want to do that. You don't have to work that hard to convince people to go play sports.
Well, what's interesting is Tom Barnes said, I felt like a man screaming alone in the desert.
I loved that.
And that's how I have felt, right? Except for this time. This time felt really, really different, like with the outpouring of support and text messages. Again, like if you're just looking online at
the
social
comments.
media controlled channels by the PPA in the comments, like I don't know if it depicts
Reads
that
that way,
but I can tell you that for the first time, like I had a facility owner reach out saying, we hosted them last year. Will you call me? Boy, do I have a lot to tell you about my experience hosting the PPA 2 years in a row.
Former employees reach out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think if I were holding a grudge, oh my God, if I were holding a grudge, we'd be,
oh my God, think of all the things we don't say.
Oh my God, think about all the things I don't say that I know about when these people reach out. Like I didn't even take the call from the facility owner. Now I kind of want to.
I know. Well, hey, you tell us in the comments. Do you want us to reach out to the facility owner?
Should I respond
want to hear
to that?
more?
Should we hear about their experience?
But there were a couple of tweets that I did grab that I'll put.
Someone wrote me and said, this is like live golf. Great players. No one cares. No one watches. Feels too exhibition. Bought all the great players, but what are they playing for? What are they fighting for? A lot of great Totter players on PGA Tour and a lot of promising players. I don't know what Totter is. A lot of great other players on the PGA Tour and a lot of promising players.
Someone wrote in response to pickleball.com's post about this. I love how you say the full story as reported on a website that is owned by the same people that own / control UPA and PPA. And they're crying, laughing emoji 3 times. So people get it. Like they understand. I'm just going to be honest. Pardo and the PPA are doing their best to gaslight us and run a huge smear campaign on Jill. The PPA is struggling. The presentation of the product is atrocious, and they are actively abusing paddle manufacturers because they broke. Yeah. So obviously, we're not going to sit here for an hour and read all of those quotes, but there's plenty.
I think people are just starting to get it.
So should we move on to what really matters? Mimi
The
and
Masters.
I playing in the 4-0 bracket on Saturday.
Yes.
No, really, what really matters, who won the Gamma Gamer paddles?
Nice.
Our winners, I think we've only heard from one or two of you, is J. Paz Wong, I Am Nautica, Mike GBENT, Melissa Strong 05Y, and Tennis Girl 6727. See, we don't hate on tennis. We'll give tennis girls pickleball paddles. Let's go. Why can't we all just get along? So those are our awesome winners. So please go into your comment on YouTube for further instructions, which is to say, email us at thispblife for next steps. So do you wanna give 5 minutes to my Masters weekend?
Absolutely. And then we'll talk about
my double bronze weekend.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about all things paddle debacle at the Masters and playing with my sister and having CJ Klinger withdraw. Which, by the way, love that Connor
More propaganda.
tweeted that I withdrew. Which
Right.
is false. Shocking there.
Yeah. No. He just retweeted someone else's tweet.
That I withdrew.
That's the real Connor move.
The best part of that is they had to find like a photo of me on my website where I'm kind of like looking down, like very sullen almost. So
With
it's
the
like
arms crossed.
Yeah, it's like they're
I liked
literally
it. It was a good
going.
picture.
It was a great
The reason
picture,
we
but they're
posted it.
like going out of their way to design narratives and posts.
Control the narrative.
Unfortunately, pickleball is synonymous with injuries. If you're like me, you're always trying to figure out solutions to optimize your performance, to be healthier on the court, and to stay injury-free.
And pain-free.
And pain-free. Pain-free pickleball is the way. I could not play pain-free pickleball without my Pro Band arm bandit. When my knee is bothering me, I have a Need It. And when I've had, unfortunately, ankle sprains, which you've maybe seen on ESPN too last year, I have an ankle bandit. Kristen, do you use the Need It?
Absolutely. I think just having that security there is like your body's reminder that everything is intact and ready to go. And there are so many other armbands I see out there trying to mitigate the pain of pickleball elbow. But if you don't have a Pro Band Bandit, you don't have it.
Well, I don't know if you knew this, but it's actually a medical device.
Right. It's designed by a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And it is using your natural pumping mechanisms to basically heal yourself.
Yeah, it's not just like a strap, right?
Exactly.
It's this actual device.
Yeah. And the body is an amazing place. So get your Pro Band Bandit today.
Yep.
You can use code JillyB for 10% off at checkout.
Pain-free pickleball.
So yeah, pretty proud. I mean, I will stand by my favorite quote in golf is every bet is won and lost on the first hole. And every medal in pickleball is won and lost on the bracket you sign up for. So yes, I played 3-5 singles and 4-0 doubles. And as you heard earlier on this podcast, I am going to be 5-0 by the end of this year, according to Jill. So I guess now I just need to start wearing a hat that says sandbagger. No, but point being, I lost my first singles a game against an awesome lefty named Heidi Lee.
Did you have the same problem where you didn't know she was left-handed for the first 25 minutes?
It only took 5 minutes this time. So
If you know,
that's
you
called
know.
improvement.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Yeah. No, she had some bullets. And I finally realized that the best way to win some points off her was like giving her junk balls.
Does anyone you play
The
against
more
know who you are? Has anyone been like, oh, I
I
listen to your podcast?
Yeah. I mean, like, probably. I run into people with relative frequency who are like, I like your pod or I've listened to the pod. And I don't necessarily differentiate if those people are in my bracket or just people I run into. But yeah.
Yes, I wasn't there for Kristen's events.
Yes.
I had left.
You were there metaphysically in my head. And I just remembered, keep it smooth and slow and give them what they don't want. And I tried not to, binky blanket on the baseline too much, while also not overcommitting to coming to the net.
Can you explain what binky blanket from the baseline means?
Oh, just like safety zone. Like, oh, I'll just never go up and I'll just never put pressure on them because they might pass me and then I don't know what will happen.
That's so funny. My safety zone feels like it's the kitchen, like feels up there.
Yeah, that would make sense. You're 3 inches taller
Okay.
and 30% faster, if not more. So yeah, so I think I did a decent job of not just sticking to one game plan or the other, although my choice of going from staying at the baseline to the net was probably a little bit more random than it was strategic. But I hit some shots, honestly, that I was like, oh, I didn't know I had that shot in me. Like some slicey kind of cross-court little knife shots. They're almost like the dead drop I'm always trying to figure out. I had fun. It was freezing for the second half. At one point, if I throw some clips in, you'll see I go from short sleeves and a skirt to baggy sweatpants and a jacket, and stayed in that the rest of the day. I was like putting my left hand in my pocket of my sweats in between points just to warm my hands up. But yeah, I had a couple matches where I was like down 6-1 or something, came back and won. And all in all, had a good time. The two people I lost to, my first match and my last match in pool play, are the people who ended up in the medal match. And that girl I lost to first ended up winning the gold. So good for you, Heidi. And then she was also in my 4-0 women's bracket, although I got the better of her on that end.
Nice.
Thanks to Mimi, my partner, the flying forehand, the serve. I mean, I think she won like 14 points on her serve and like 25 points just on a flying forehand in the middle. So there were several points where I didn't have to even hit a ball. Really conserved my energy. I was telling Mimi at the end of the day, I think the amount of energy I exerted on the right side plus singles equals what it took for her to play left all day. So
you ended up with a
bronze in both. So we lost
bronze in both.
We lost
Nice.
our first match in women's as well. So we battled all the way back in our back draw and won bronze. So I feel like that was something to be proud of.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Watching back the video makes me realize how interesting it is that I don't look like I'm that good to me. Like I can only assume that when people play against me, they're like, how is this person beating me? But because I have your strategy in my head the whole time, like all I'm trying to do is like figure out the wind and figure out the weaker player and just commit to that strategy. And then make balls. I see a lot of people I play against that look better and hit harder and have better strokes, but they just miss long. They miss in the net, they miss long, they miss wide. And I just think this is a game of
Get one more ball over the net, literally.
Yeah.
Simplify.
Hit your spot. Just hit your spot. It doesn't have to be pretty, although it's something I am going to continue to work on, is to improve my technique.
We talk a lot about this on the Pickleball Breakdown podcast, and we just released an episode on the 5 drills you need to take your game to the next level. So if you're listening at home and you haven't checked that podcast out, it's one of our best ones, all on drills, drill like a pro. And something Scott and I talk a lot about is, hey, if you can get your paddle on the ball, like anywhere, you can get that ball over the net.
Yeah.
So as you're running for a ball, don't think about, when I get there, where am I going to put it? Just try and get there.
Right. And I always remember early on you saying, if you can touch the ball,
yeah,
you can get it over the net.
If you can touch the ball, you can get over the net.
And so for me, that translated to like, I should give myself some credit every time I run fast enough to touch the ball. That's means
a win.
Next time I'm going to run fast enough to stop and then touch the ball. And then the next time I'm going to be fast enough to run, touch the ball, and get it over the net.
I'm glad you said that. When my mom was teaching us tennis growing up, she always said, just try and touch every single ball. Don't let a ball get past you. I don't care if you get it over. Yeah. I don't care if you get it in. Just go touch the ball.
Yeah. And there was one person I played against that I did end up beating. But like when you go from a person who just like doesn't go for balls to like a person who's like, oh, they got that one. And then they got that one. And then they ran for that one and they didn't get it, but looked like they almost could have. Then you're in your own head now. Like, I better actually hit better shots or like, do something more with this the next time. I can't just sit on my laurels and pop it into the open court.
So moving on to my Masters experience,
Yes.
So this blog goes out, this tweet goes out, and I'm playing the Masters that week. And I get a call from Darren Klinger, and he says, we have to withdraw. CJ has to withdraw. You know, he can't play with you. And I said, what? And he goes, yeah, I wish you would have waited 1 week to send out that tweet. And I said, oh my gosh, so you're getting pressure. And he's like, I don't feel comfortable, you know, saying one way or the other. And I said, please just answer me. You know, is this of your own volition, or are you under heat? He said, I'm under heat. So, you know, who could CJ and Darren have been under heat from? Well, PPA or maybe Proton. I find it hard to believe it would have been Proton. I mean, they know they want CJ on a podium. They want him winning matches, right? And like, we're a good team. I'm not saying we would have been on a podium. I'm just saying, like, you know, they want to give him opportunities.
Certainly him not playing guarantees he's not on a podium.
Yeah, exactly.
As an opportunity to maybe be on a podium.
So if the PPA, if the PPA pressured Darren to pull out, I'd say that's low even for them to steal an opportunity from a 17-year-old who traveled to be out there and play. And I appreciate that, you know, Darren wanted to remove CJ from any potential drama too. I'm sure that's part of it. However, CJ sure got plenty of drama as he and James Ignatowicz almost lost. They won 11-9 in a third to 2 qualifiers, 2 of whom are my training partners, Kyron Burl from the desert and Jericho Grolman in Orange County. I literally train with both of them.
And I think CJ issued an apology after. Like, even was like, I'm sorry. I agree. It looks in.
So it was 10-9.
This is what I was told. I can fact check that before we release the pod. But
it was 10-9, and CJ and James called a ball out that from a couple different angles. You know,
which is neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there.
To me, like, you're pressuring a 17-year-old. Okay, that's pretty low. Number 2, CJ's the only one who has anything to really gain from this event. Jill doesn't play the PPA. She doesn't care about her points.
Yeah,
CJ has points to gain. And a great partner who, you know, as much as we like to joke, you find every lefty in pickleball who's any good. It's also hard for lefties to find the right strong left side girl to play with. So they are a great fit. And every time we've played with CJ, it's been great.
It's been awesome.
Family, and they are always very effusive about, like, you know, how much he's
so the best part is, so after,
just a bummer.
So
they're stripping CJ of a good time.
Well, the best part is, after the PPA allegedly pressures CJ to pull out, Connor Pardo tweets or Instagrams a photo of me with the words, Jilly B withdraws from mixed.
Yeah.
No, I didn't actually. Literally, I didn't. I never sent in a withdrawal. I actually showed up that day. Like, if CJ wanted to play, I would have played. And they must have made the draws, you guys, right before they pressured CJ allegedly to pull out, because guess who we would have played in the second round of qualifying? Can you guys guess at home who CJ and I would have played in the second round of qualifying? My sister and her mixed partner.
So funny, which inadvertently was like giving a gift to the family. Because your sister made it all the way through qualifying into the main draw in both mixed and women's doubles.
I think the weirdest part about this week...
Do you think they're going to offer her a contract?
Natalie, we heard you have 3 kids under the age of 8 years old. You've been playing for 1 year and you drink a bottle of wine a night as your hydration methodology for your tournaments. Would you like a contract? But no, I think the weirdest part about all of this was like the constant bullying. Oh my gosh. Like, after the Tweetstorm and their responses, it like didn't end. Connor would be like tweeting Jilly B withdraws, or Instagramming Jilly B withdraws.
And the tweet poll.
He like did a poll that was like, should we put Jill on center court if she makes it out of qualifying? Like, was like obsessed with me. Like, I rent space in that guy's head for free. Yeah. Like, I am not thinking about you that much.
Totally. Yeah, no, it's just control the narrative.
My sister and I, we make it out of qualifying, and then we play in the main draw against Kate Fahey and Tina Pisnik, obviously an incredible team. And it was fun. I mean, despite all the drama going in, I think I was pretty like subdued in the match, like kind of over all the drama, the digital drama from the week with the PPA. Yeah. Adam Stone was like, "Oh, I've never seen Jill play so passive," and like I definitely felt very passive in that. Like, I wasn't out there like, let's take heads off. I was out there like, I'm playing with my sister. Like, this is fun. Pickleball is joy. And Tina and Kate are a great team. And I
Totally.
thought my sister really held her own. Like, kudos to her for sure.
No, absolutely. There were some great counters, some great battles,
Really
some
good
great
points.
moments. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we lost like
My favorite part was when you let an out ball go that Tina hit, and you go, you got to aim for her. She hits those.
my sister. Aim for my sister. She hits the outballs.
And then you left one that Kate hit that went in, and Tina goes, you got to hit hers. Hers are in.
yeah. No, I like Tina and Kate a lot.
Actually,
And
that was the one other thing I was going to say that I had in my head when I was playing.
Tina tried to take my head off on a
is
ball.
Just duck. Like, I am like so obsessed with not hitting balls.
Oh my God, Tina tried to take my head off. It hit the back. It hit the video board. My sister hit I said, Natalie, you hit 7 outballs. Like, if you watch that match, I'm screaming, ow, like every 2 seconds. I don't remember what we lost. 6-3? 7? No, 7-3? 6-3? Anyway, the score line, I thought the points were really good. Like,
Yeah, the score
yeah,
was a side out scoring classic
totally.
where did not look like that, perhaps.
One quick thing I didn't touch on. My sister was violently ill with that norovirus the night
it really went around.
before qualifiers. So she wakes up at 7 a.m. after vomiting all night. Keep in mind, she's got 3 kids. She's also sleeping in the same room in bed with, vomiting all night, goes out, plays 2 matches in mixed and qualifies. One, it was a 3-game death battle against a great team, Madison Grolman and Jerry Grolman, who we talked about a little bit with, playing CJ and James and almost beating them. And then she goes on to play a women's match with me, and we qualify. And she's just such a champ, right? Vomiting all night. So 2 days later, I'm home, and I wake up at 1 a.m. And what do I start doing? I have the norovirus from her. Yeah. I am vomiting. I am so sick. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I wake up in the morning. I can't even walk downstairs to get Advil, much less go play 6 hours of a professional pickleball tournament. And that's what she did.
That is nuts.
She makes tough look weak. We need a different word for Natalie. This is funny. My mom and I call her the Terminator.
Yes, she is the Terminator.
She is the Terminator.
She is a force. She is a wrecking ball. So all in all, we were happy to be pseudo home back in the desert, and got that last PPA ever under our belt. The last PPA.
Well, what's interesting, so they canceled Los Cab. Let's talk about that for a quick second. There were like 420 registrants, and then they sent out an email. My sister was playing in it, so she got a message from them, and it said, like, due to an abundance of caution and recommendations from local authorities due to the fires, we're canceling this event. We're going to hold your registration fees and apply them to a tournament in June at the other Southern California tournament in San Clemente. And my sister was like, what? No, you can't like hold my money till June. And no, I don't want to play in your like June event. Like, I'd like to request a refund. She had to email them. I think she got her refund. And if she didn't, I'm sure she will. But she was like so weirded out by that. And then I was like, oh, did they cancel because they only had 420 people? Because, these tournaments can be huge losses, huge cost centers if you're not getting 1,200 players per event. Like, they're huge, huge loss centers.
Yeah. So,
which makes what they've done with the paddles so interesting. So, like, I had to play a Yola S3, great paddle, by the way. And all these pros, like, there were so many pros who pulled out of the Masters because they couldn't play their paddle sponsor and their paddle, like, I'm talking about qualifying. And so these event fees are huge, guys. So, like, think about this. Think about the economics of this. It's $750 to play all 3 events. And these qualifying numbers are big. And so you have pros now pulling out because they want to play their paddle, but there's only a certain number of paddles that are actually doing the UPA certification, right? Gamma is not one of them. That's why I didn't play Gamma. So that has to hurt registration fees if you have the pros not doing them.
Right. And all of the signed
not
players,
doing the
of course,
qualifiers,
don't pay entry fees. Mm-hmm. So it's like only the ones that are paying the entry fees that are probably likely to pull out, the ones that are actually part of the bottom line.
Yeah. So I wonder if we're going to see a diminished event registration fee due to the paddle stuff on the pro side.
Yeah, I wonder. You got to figure a lot of those players are also people who are not on contract with a paddle company and are just going to play whatever their YOLA is allowing.
No, I mean, I think it's
Right?
the opposite. No, I think it's the opposite. I think a lot of these up and coming players are
Need
are
their
more
small paddle
dependent
com-
on
yeah.
their paddle company than like
Okay.
I am, to be honest, right? Or
Right.
that other higher level players are with other sponsors. Like the paddle, like they're paying their entry fees, their prize money matching, they're giving free equipment, then they don't have to
That's
buy
true.
a $250 paddle every 4 weeks. So it's like
Those are the exact
those
people
players
who
would
are
rather go play
really
NVZ.
volatile.
Yeah, they'd rather go play NVZ. They'd rather go play Kappa. They'd rather go play APP than be in breach of their paddle agreement on the PPA.
Very interesting. Yeah. But yeah, real quick, just the rules around the paddle companies and the whole Selkirk only allowing their players to play the 008 and having fewer choices this week, or the blacked out paddles like we talked about happening. It's still a moving target to see what costs are going to be put forth by the UPA for the rest of the year and when those deadlines are going to move.
Oh, thank you for bringing
Right.
this up again. So since our last podcast, the UPA basically sent a letter to all the manufacturers saying, look, if you paid the $2,000 preliminary certification fee, we're going to extend. We're going to give you
Right.
like a X number of 4-month reprieve. Can you remind me? Do you know how
I don't
this
know
ended
if
up?
it was a 1 month or a 4 month.
Okay, but we're going to give
But
you some type of time
there's-
extension in order to determine if you want to do the full marketing license, correct? It was like
Yeah,
some type of...
type of like, hey, okay, at the very baseline, we're going to create a $2,000 plan where you can continue to exist in a diminished capacity on our tour, basically.
Okay,
So if you want,
for a certain amount of time.
full decals, full marketing, full visibility, you still have to ratchet your dollars up.
But still, it's pretty clear that if you listen to other podcasts, that the paddle manufacturers are going to work together and try and fight this.
Yeah, or at least,
In some-
again, just like we talked about with the Player Collective, like unite the information. He talks about a lot of these emerging paddle brands, like don't know about stare-at tests or all these other, grit factors and ways of understanding the paddle testing at all. And so they can kind of be an in-between where you could hypothetically send the PMA a paddle and pre-test before you waste your money submitting it for testing with any other entities. Because these are, a lot of people go into making a paddle with a marketing brain or an idea, but not necessarily an engineering brain.
Yeah, but I think more than just aggregating the communication and the information, I think there's going to be legal recourse
There's always
from
power
paddle
in numbers.
manufacturers.
Yeah. Power.
That's what
in
we keep
numbers.
hearing over and over and over.
There's only one entity in pickleball that is definitely making money.
The Pickleball Slam.
Yes. Pickleball Slam 3 coming back to Vegas.
Steffi and Andre are
These
making
tickets-
money.
These tickets are like $1,200.
We found the entity to invest in, you guys.
We know what people want to watch. We want to watch Suckpot former tennis pros.
Oh my God.
No, I'm sure Andre and Steffi are much better pickleball players than I am. I have no business arguing for their skills, but legends in their own right. And they're selling those tickets. They're selling them out. So yeah, if you want to go see Pickleball Slam 3, it's coming back to Vegas and tickets are on sale.
All right, you guys. So 7 months ago, I signed with Gamma, a multi-year deal I was so excited about. And then in October, we had this super earnest conversation. They brought in a new marketing team and they didn't want to invest in pro players effective January 1st of this year. And that included me. So even though I have a contract with them and I could have stayed on, ultimately, you want to be with a partner that wants to be with you, and you want something that is going to be potentially long-term, like not even 3 years, but maybe like a 10-year relationship where when I'm done playing, I could work with them on other strategic initiatives. And so it just didn't seem like Gamma wanted to do that. And that's okay. Like shifts happen. I'm stoked to have won the amount of tournaments I had won and had their support over the past 7 months. So I wish them literally nothing but good vibes. And I think we're seeing this not just from Gamma, you guys, but across the industry. Chris and I kind of have this back and forth on our gross revenue sales for paddles down. from, year over year. Because I think we're seeing paddle companies, and I'm not speaking about Gamma specifically, but making these big shifts, whether it's, the easiest fat to cut is letting go of the pros. That is the easiest fat. And I went on the Dink 4 months ago to talk about the YOLO lawsuit. And I said, paddle manufacturers are hurting right now. And someone commented, Jilly B's loose with the facts. And I think I was right. But you bring up a good point, which is, are paddle sales down, or is it getting splintered because you've got smaller brands? Like,
Right.
What were you saying coming in?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of like the early stage big name brands have had a pretty easy time having a stronghold on the market.
Good distribution.
With, Amazon and distribution. And now we're seeing a lot of new brands with fast moving creative initiatives really grabbing good portions of the market. Like you see Carbon, Vatic, Honolulu, all these brands
Thrive,
that are talked
6-0.
about. Thrive, of course, 6-0. So, it will be interesting to see if it follows the storyline of snowboarding, as we often talk about, where, in the 90s, it was like hundreds of different snowboard brands, and then it ended up consolidating down. And of course, there's still bigger and smaller brands, but it's hard to keep that engine going when you're a mom and pop shop.
If I had to guess, I'd say like accessory sales are probably through the roof. Like balls.
I mean, the perfect
grips.
product. Light, small, ships quickly and easily, but costs a lot. That's the goal.
So Selkirk released a statement. Pickleball.com, which is an entity again owned by the UPA, released some type of post in addition to the Jilly B withdraws from mixed. In addition to that one, saying Kwong was served with legal papers at the Masters.
Oh, God,
so
yeah.
Selkirk released a statement that said Kwong Duong, and for those of you that don't know, he is under contract with Selkirk, but he was seen playing a proton. Kwong Duong is under contract with Selkirk through April 2025, reads the statement. It goes on. Following multiple contract breaches he has made over the course of months, with the first dating back to September 4th, both on social media and at in-person events, we continued our efforts to work with him to find resolutions in the hopes to prevent continuous and additional breaches, which included unauthorized auction of unreleased paddles and prototypes to the public. A cease and desist letter was sent electronically. Claims of serving Kwong Duong on the pickleball court at a tournament or even in person are inherently false. At Selkirk, we believe in honoring and fulfilling agreements between us and our partners athletes as a way to grow the game and build the sport. Wild. You have 2 more months left of your contract. It's not like Selkirk makes bad paddles. They make great paddles. Wild to be in breach.
Yeah.
And really, really ballsy.
And to be selling paddles on the side. I wonder how he was doing that. And how they found out. But yeah, I get the drift that they were like paddles that weren't even on the market. It wasn't like his extra paddles.
Yeah.
So
wow.
You start seeing those float around and you're like, oh, we only give those to 3 people.
Wow.
So are you ready to talk about this week coming up?
Yes.
We are at the home of the owner of The Fort.
Brad Tuckman is the owner of The Fort, and he has been amazing to get to know. We're definitely going to have him on the podcast, you guys, to learn about how he built this incredible facility with trials and tribulations. I think there's something for all of us to learn. Yeah,
he mentioned that it's public land, right? It's Sawyer Park, and the legalities of being a private public kind of tug of war is a unique one. He said something last night. I don't want to reveal too much because I want him to come on the pod. But he's like, I think if I knew how hard this was going to be, I wouldn't have done it. And I said, I think we all wouldn't do anything in life if we knew how hard everything was going to be. But he then also said, nothing in life worth doing isn't hard, right? It kind of has to be hard for you to want to do it. And I said, yeah, otherwise, how would you ever explain the popularity of the game of golf? Oh, that's a really good point. So we're at Brad's amazing house. We're about to head to the Fort to check it out for the very first time. And I play tomorrow with Will Howells. Super excited. And so then, excited. Of course, with Megan in women's. So you and Will here's to start of the year. I'm playing the Thrive Smoke paddle. This thing is pretty amazing. Yeah. And I could play any paddle I want in the world right now. And that's the one that I'm choosing to play with. And it just got approved
today. So that's good timing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I
How
don't
would you
know. I
describe
don't
it?
really know what I was going to play.
How would you describe it? Like the Yola, but with more control, more spin?
It's kind of like the 3S, but firmer. So I haven't tried the Paddle Tech yet. I will, but I'd have to imagine it must feel somewhat similar to the Paddle Tech.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to try that too. But yeah, it's going to be a great week. You and Will have been like trying to get a something on the books for over a year, I feel like.
Yeah.
Or certainly since our first APP last year in Sacramento, which was, I guess, March. So
He's an incredible player. I cannot wait to play with him and do battle. And he's creative too. You know, if we got to switch it up and put him on the right, he's open to doing that. Like,
you know what else is poetic is the last tournament of the year, last year, Nationals. He's the only person who beat you.
I know. Will. We're 1-1. I beat him once last year. He beat me once.
That's so funny.
Now we're on the same side. He's one of those
That's
people
great.
you'd much rather have on your side of the court.
Yeah, and the Dink made the interesting point of saying that you're the number 1 seed in women's doubles and he's the number 1 seed in men's doubles.
I was going to say, couldn't the Dink have made the exact same point about Megan and Jack? Jack and Will are playing, and they're the number 1 seed, and Megan and I are playing, and we're the number 1 seed.
A whole happy family.
Yeah.
So funny. But yeah, so the fort, it's got indoor and outdoor kind of weatherproof tenting. So super excited to see it. And we heard last night too, they're home of Rainstorm.
Yes. Let's
Official
go.
energy drink of the
Thank
fort.
goodness. I'm going to need one or two.
Yeah, Rainstorm just came out with Tropical as their new flavor.
It's really good. It's very pineapple.
Pineapple and orange. So refreshing. But I brought some Rainstorm to my friends at the courts at TTC. They
saw
were
that.
stoked. Yeah. So let's get it.
Let's
get
get
after it. And to those of you out there, I want to make a public announcement that I was trying level 10 out of 10, not to interrupt Jill this episode. So tell me in the comments how I did. How is my interruption level? If you've made it this far, you've survived it.
So much going on in the world, you guys. The fires have just ravaged Los Angeles. Thank you to everyone who's reached out to us to ask us how we're doing. We're about an hour and a half south of the fires. Kristen's brother did have to evacuate. I know Mark Thomas is a referee and a firefighter. He left the Masters early to go to his home in Northern California. Then he drove down to the center in Southern California to get ready to go fight fires. Thank you so much to Mark. And our hearts just go out to everyone who's impacted. I heard another referee lost her home in Altadena. And it's just heart-wrenching. I went to Pepperdine. I was raised till I was 7 in Encino. I was born at Cedars-Sinai. And just pray for these victims.
Absolutely. Yeah. I saw TTC is putting a collection together for necessary goods. And I just encourage anyone who's in SoCal to find a donation center. We certainly will be. And
we're cleaning out our closet and going to donate at TTC. So thank you to TTC for setting up.
Yeah. It's amazing in these moments of tragedy how really the true charitable, amazing humans emerge. So our hearts go out to everyone in that damage zone.
Pickleball is joy.
Absolutely. Don't let anyone tell you differently.
Thank you guys. Thank you for everything.
This pickleball life.